Sunday morning, Sunday morning, Sunday morning, Sunday morning.
I think you can integrate the cause of the war into every program. I don't think you can understand even the actions of the battle and fully appreciate them until you do.
If I'm doing a formalized tour out on the battlefield, causes of the war is one of the first things I bring up. Because this battlefield that we're on right now, Chickamauga, it's only a portion of the entire story.
I don't really think I'm going to start with the causes of the war and then focus into a micro history. Now, granted, it'll probably come up in discussion. There will be some way that it will be woven in. It might be a tangent. It might be, well, you know, Mississippi, where are these guys from? What counties? And so you can kind of pull it in from there. And I think most good interpreters will do that.
It's hard to put the slavery issue, I think, or let's say the causes of the war into a 30-minute, that's usually standard for us, program on the battlefield trying to tell the story of the men who these visitors, who are the visitors are now standing on the same ground that these men fought on.
I think that a lot of people don't want to deal with the issues at hand, especially the reasons of the Civil War, the motivations behind people for why they did the things they did. But that's what we're here for, in my opinion. The National Park Service is to tell a story, interpret a story, and for people to be able to get their own judgments, their own evaluations of the things that we own and we treasure. And I think it's important to talk about those things, definitely.
So do I believe that you need to work in the causes of the war on every program? No. Do I believe that you could, for a few minutes, hit on that and should? Yeah, I believe it's very possible and that it is important.
When I'm in control and I have the floor with a group, if I'm giving a lecture, like I said, or a talk, then the causes are going to be a main portion of that. Because I believe that if you're coming to a lecture, or you're coming to a program, or you're coming on a tour, that you have a vested interest, that you want to know more about the Civil War and the battle itself. So we're going to get you up to that point.
I think it's not necessarily, okay, let's check them off the list. Let's make sure we hit the causes. Let's make sure we do an introduction. Let's make sure we hit the body of the program. I think a good interpreter can weave that in.
Do I believe that every person who fully visits Gettysburg, and by fully visiting, I'm not talking about the people who come and say, I have 20 minutes, but people who take advantage of the film, where they go to the cyclorama, they go out on the fields, they do a licensed guided tour, they do a ranger program, they go back into the museum. If in the course of a full visit to Gettysburg, they cannot put that battle within the context of the greater issues, then we've failed.
I think a lot of people say, well, you can't really think about how they thought back then because it's a different time period. Well, you know, human beings are still human beings and they all live by patterns in a lot of ways. And so if you see it that way, you know, maybe they can relate a little bit more to it.
If you could air the dirty laundry for both sides and not use the slavery issue as a divisive issue to say that the North is more virtuous than the South, I think Southerners would buy into that slavery was the primary cause a lot quicker, or be more open-minded. What they are defensive against is that is a monocausic explanation that places all the virtuosity on one side and all the demonization on the other, when we all know that there's a lot of blame to go around.
Southerners, a lot of times, I think I can speak to this, and I do often to people. I say, I'm from Alabama. I'm a Southerner, born in Alabama. That a lot of times we're very contentious people. You know, we're controversial a lot of times, and no matter how much information and how much support you give us, we're going to stand our ground.
I think if you put out those primary sources and you try to connect those people to the primary sources and say, you know, it's not your opinion, it's not my opinion, this is Abraham Lincoln's opinion. and he's the incoming president. So I tend to side with what he's going to say. But obviously, you know, there are some people, even when you present that, they're so stuck in their core view of why they think the war happens. I really think it is hard to try to show them a different point of view.
Let the people of the time tell the story. Let there be questions in the mind. I mean, I think of like a good church sermon. If there's a controversial, do you want your pastor to talk about controversial subjects? Some might, some might not. I think the best perhaps church sermon would be one where they do take on that tough subject, but you don't know at the end. There's more questions for you at the end than answers, and you don't know where that pastor personally sits, but they've given you a lot to think about. So maybe the same is true for interpretive programs. Maybe the best interpretation comes when that interpreter has provided you with lots of things to think about, and you don't know. They're letting the people of the time talk, and you don't know where he or she personally sits on that fence.